Hello and welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik. Now, one must wonder the pain and grief that forces a person to protest, given that there is an evident threat to their life if they do so. One wonders what causes entire families, women and children, to stand in the range of live ammunition every Friday for one entire year. It is difficult to imagine what must go through a person's mind after knowing that 195 people have been killed, 50 of whom were children, and almost 29,000 people injured, and that they still make their way to a fence bordered with snipers to protest a year later. All of this is difficult to fathom, but for Palestinians living in Gaza, this is their life. This is the only way they can express their sufferings and their resolve in a place that has become an open-air prison, a place which has a crippling economy, a place in which only 5% of the water is clean to drink, a place in which a happy future is just a withering hope. On tonight's show, we will discuss the life of all those individuals in Gaza who face an unimaginable circumstance each and every day. Joining us for this discussion today is Norma Hashim, who is a Palestinian refugee expert and who is also the author of The Prisoner Diaries, joining us from Kuala Lumpur. We're also joined by Mr. Hamdi Shaqqura, who is based in Gaza City, and he's the director of Palestinian Center for Human Rights and Democratic Development Unit, joining us from Gaza. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. Mr. Hamdi, I'd like to begin with you. What can you tell us about the human rights condition right now in Gaza?
Well, thank you for this program. No one can give more account than those who live under occupation, under daily pressure from the occupying power. The situation is very terrible, very miserable in general. Let me first emphasize that the human rights situation and the humanitarian situation in Gaza, it has not been the outcome of natural causes, but rather it has been the outcome of designed systematic policy aimed at this situation of complete impoverishment, of complete hope in the future imposed on Gazans. And that goes back to mainly to 2007.
Yeah.
And even prior to that, going back to the outcome of Palestinian first impartial election that has been in place in the Middle East in general. Since that time, sanctions and collective punishment has been imposed in Gaza, which has been the real cause behind all miserable conditions in Gaza.
Yeah.
To discuss, it's a long way to discuss when it comes to the real cause and the root cause, which is the ongoing occupation of Palestinian land. Gaza is part of the occupied Palestinian territory, occupied in 1967. Since that time, Palestinians have been subjected to oppressive measures, to collective punishment imposed by Israel on all Palestinian civilians living both in Gaza and the West Bank. But when it comes to Gaza, the uniqueness of Gaza, we are talking about an area of almost 365 square kilometers, where we populated by at least 2 million people.
One of the most densely populated areas in the world.
In the world. And those people have been subjected to illegal measures, notwithstanding 3 wars imposed on Gaza or by Israeli forces in less than 8 years. So whole generations in Gaza only know one thing: the attacks and daily attacks by Israeli forces. Since 2005, Israel claimed that it has redeployed its forces in Gaza and has no longer responsible for any thing on Gaza. But this is against the truth. The truth is that Gaza is still occupied, Gaza is still besieged by Israel, and all aspects of life designed and affected by Israeli forces.
Yeah. So, Mr. Hamdi, I do want to talk about the Israeli blockade further, but before that, I'd like to talk about what has happened since last year's protests, the Great Return March. There have almost been 300 killings. There have been almost 30,000 people who are hospitalized. Tell us about that situation. How did violence increase, if it did at all? And how did life change after last year, March?
Well, first of all, the response from the Israeli occupation, the Israeli occupying forces, we are talking about the use of lethal force against civilians, against thousands and thousands of civilians who are entitled to their right to protest. We monitored the situation over the course of the last year. And as you know, we are talking about almost weekly demonstrations organized by civilians in areas adjacent to the borders with Israel. As we monitor the situation, we can confirm that these demonstrations have been very peaceful. It has been an occasion for Palestinians to organize some social, cultural events and sometimes athletic events. In some few cases, some youth managed to approach the fence, and the response they got, those snipers, hundreds of Israeli snipers who are fortified behind sand dunes, behind vehicles and military towers, just responded with lethal force, using all this suffering for Palestinians to add to the...
Mr. Hamdi, I do take your point. I've registered it, and it's something we will talk about further, the protests and their right to protest. But before that, Ms. Norma, I'd like to ask you about the Palestinian refugee crisis, especially the fact that in Gaza, so many of such a large population are registered refugees. Tell us about that, and tell us more about the entire situation.
Well, there are 2 million people in Gaza, and all of them under siege. And this is entirely man-made. People can't leave, they can't go in, and they can't go out. If I wanted to go into Gaza, I need permission, I need approval. And in fact, I just got approval to enter Gaza later this year. But, you know, it's like we can go anywhere we like, but people in Gaza cannot. And there are like many, many things which they can't bring in. So people still live in a situation where they live in bombed out places, they are homeless, and the unemployment is very high. The situation at the moment, I think, is the worst I've seen in my 10 years of
Why do you say that?
Work in Gaza.
Tell us more about that.
Why is it the worst now?
Yeah,
well, I'm treasurer with Viva Palestina Malaysia, and we've done like millions of dollars worth of projects since 2009. In the past, we used to be able to do microfinancing projects where we give some loans to women to start businesses, and we did other things like swimming classes. But now, all I get asked for every day is food relief. This is the extent of the suffering now in Gaza. Water is undrinkable. I think 70% of people are food insecure now because unemployment is so high. 70% of youth are unemployed. And the thing is, many university students, 70% of students, in fact, can't pay their fees. And this is a kind of people, the Palestinians in Gaza, they are highly educated people. And to be denied the right to education because you can't afford it, and then to live in such poverty now with food dependency, I think 70% of Gaza now is food insecure. Yeah. So instead of doing projects which I feel would be like long-term and would empower
it's people, about immediate relief.
We find that we need to do food projects, which is terrible, food and water projects. It just comes down to the basics.
Yeah.
And this is what the siege is doing. It's just killing Gaza.
So, Mr. Hamdi, you're hearing what Ms. Norma is talking about, and you, I'm sure, can tell us about the on-ground situation even further. What are the day-to-day struggles in trying to get food and trying to get access to clean water? Also, electricity, which is only provided to homes for around 6 to 8 hours. Tell us more about those everyday struggles.
Well, in fact, this is the case in Gaza. People are struggling for their lives, for their daily life. With unemployment rates exceeds 43%, with poverty rates exceeds those who live exceeds 60 to 65%. Those who live under with some contributions from international agencies, we are talking about almost 85% of the population. Yes, life is very tough. It's very difficult. And it's hard to really understand how people, I believe they are very strong even, but it's hard to imagine how they adapted to this miserable kind of conditions. They are strong enough and they are fighting for their rights. It's terrible to continue this life. We have been warning international community that the outcome of these collective punishment would be explosion in the Gaza Strip. And this is what we warn again. Things will never stop at this point. Things will never go without any further deterioration. It's a call for the international community to intervene and to take actions, because as I said, this is not the outcome of natural reasons, but rather it's policies. And what we need is policies to intervene, in this case in Gaza, with the Israel Authority to stop collective punishment, to reopen Gaza, to allow Gaza to function again.
Mr.
If we are
Hamdi,
talking about the
Mr. Hamdi, you're talking about how a political situation is, a political solution is the need of the hour here, because it is a man-made crisis that has been created in Gaza. And from everything you've been talking about, how lives have become unlivable in Gaza, I'd also want to touch upon how the situation is in hospitals and medical facilities. How many running medical facilities are there with so many people being injured, almost 30,000 in the last year? Who is providing relief to them? Are all of them getting medical treatment? What can you tell us about all these questions?
Well, when it comes to exactly what you're talking about, especially on Fridays, the situation, the health sector do whatever possible they can, but the number of wounded persons, the number of killed persons exceeds the capacity of all hospitals. For example, last Friday, and I have witnessed in at least 2 hospitals in Gaza, how they are ready and were prepared to receive hundreds. Fortunately, the number of injuries was not the average, was so much below the average weekly injured persons. And I think hospitals managed to take care of all people. But still, this doesn't mean that our capacity in hospitals, mainly we're talking about government-run hospitals, which by themselves suffer from the lack of equipment, lack of materials because of the closure, because of the financial situation, because of measures taken against Gaza. We are talking about UNRWA, United Nations clinics. We are talking about those sector. All of them is the whole capacity is very much behind the needs, especially in times of emergency, when in one day they were forced, or they have been forced to receive thousands of injured persons, not to count other thousands of those who inhalated gas.
Right.
I'm talking about thousands of people who are injured with live bullets and rubber. And
Mr. Hamdi, something to what you're talking about is also something that we read about and hear about, that people in Gaza have very, very restricted mobility in the case of emergency medical situations. And this is something that I want to ask Ms. Norma Hashim on. It seems that Israel's permits for allowing movement in terms of medical emergency situations has declined. What can you tell us about that? Which cases are considered to be emergencies in which people can move out of Gaza and seek medical help?
From what I've heard from personal experiences of Palestinian friends, I've had a friend whose sister died because she couldn't go to Egypt to seek medical treatment. People do die at the borders because it's just impossible sometimes to leave Gaza. And sometimes you have cases where children who are injured and need to get to Israel, because Israeli hospitals are only able to provide this kind of service. The children are allowed, but the mother is not allowed. So it becomes a ridiculous situation where the child has a permit to go, but the mother has not been cleared. So
then who's the guardian in that situation? What happens?
You know, sometimes it means the child cannot go. Or it can get, maybe they will get a relative in the West Bank. to have to take care of the child, and the mother stays behind in Gaza. We have seen also the aid that people are asking for now. A lot of people are asking for medical aid, medicines, because there's a shortage, like a 50% shortage of medicines now. And another kind of project that we found we had to create is the one where we actually tell young nurses and medical graduates, we give them a small salary to work in hospitals, because the hospitals are so broke, they can't pay doctors and nurses. And so there's a shortage of people when they come in, injured from the Great Return March. They can't get treatment because nobody's there to deal with them. So we're trying to assist in getting more people to work in the hospitals as interns and give them also some employment.
Ms. Norma, you mentioned about how kids, they are sometimes given permits, but their parents aren't, their mothers aren't. In this case, I wonder, aren't there any rules and regulations? I know that it's a crisis situation, but aren't there any rules and regulations, exception cases in which a person will indefinitely receive a permit? Or is it all based on chance and luck?
It's based on Israel. Yeah, it's like luck, isn't it? No, there's nothing certain about whether you can get treatment or not when you're injured, or sometimes you need like heart surgery or any kind of medical treatment. No, there's no guarantee that you will get. You have to apply. You have to apply. You may get it, you may not get it, and your guardian may get it, and she may not get it. So it is tough. In fact, we find that it's not only that. Living in Gaza for children, they found that 50% of children have lost the will to live. Can you just imagine that children have no will to live because all of them suffer from PTSD, this post-traumatic stress disorder, living under drones and bomb attacks, and not being able to leave, being enclosed in this jail. So it's extremely cruel for children to live under these conditions. And then without electricity, they live in the heat in summer, the cold in winter, and the shortage of food and clean water. It's just terrible for children now. It's a very bad situation for kids. And that's why you have children who go to the Great Return March. I mentioned before that my friend's neighbor, who's 11 years old, he went to the Great Return March and he was shot in the head and killed. Sometimes people feel there's no will to live. They will just do anything because, what is this life already? So it's terrible for the youth as well. I heard there are more suicides now. There's like no future, because if you want to work, where can you get jobs? 70% of people, young people have no jobs. And I know even university salaries, the lecturers' salaries have been cut to even like $100 a month. People are just living on the breadline, and 33%, 1/3 of Gaza is living in extreme poverty.
Yeah.
So this is a terrible man-made situation. The siege must be lifted. That's all that needs to be done. The siege has to be lifted.
And Ms. Norma, you have been talking about how kids as young as 11 years old are going to these protests and marches precisely because they don't see a will to live, and this is the only way they can have some sort of expression. Mr. Hamdi, we know that there's so many so many international conventions that are supposed to protect child's rights. And here in Gaza, where almost 50% of the population is under 18 years old, what can you tell us about, Ms. Norma has shared her experiences, but what can you also tell us about the conditions for children there and how lives are worsening?
Remember that we have been in this situation for many decades, and the situation deteriorates more and more and more, especially for children. Yes, we have a whole generation now. If you have, let's say, a 10 years old, this 10 years old boy or girl has witnessed 3 executive wars, 2008, 2012, and 2014. Not to mention the frequent attacks between 2014 until now. Just a few days ago, we had a new round of escalation where witnessed lived new attacks, new bombardments. In the last attack, let's say at least 75 people, which was not, it took only for a few hours by Israeli bombardments. We are talking about 75 members, families, mostly children and women, been forced to, now without house. Their homes, their apartments have been demolished. or destroyed by the attacks. The apartments have been targeted. The targets were merely civilians. Why? Because at some points, one of the apartments was occupied by a security office. Security is part of the civilian population. Israel has no right to attack these civilian police offices.
Yeah.
No, nothing justifies that those people now added to thousands of displaced persons as the result of 3 wars. Now we have additional forces. This is the situation how we live. Yes, children are deprived from their basic rights. Yes, it's true. Conventions, there are conventions. We suppose that we protect child, but in this case, Israeli forces, they have no, even they don't even distinguish between a child or an old person. And what happened on the adjacent line of the borders when they shoot randomly, and sometimes even with the snipers, they target children, they target women, they target civilians at large, and this explains how the death toll increases every single fight.
Yeah.
Yes, the situation for children is the worst for amongst the civilian population in Gaza.
And it's shocking to know how the situation is increasing while there is attention, of course not enough attention being drawn in the international realm about how Israeli soldiers are specifically targeting children. Thank you so much, Mr. Hamdi, for joining us and talking to us. Ms. Norma, continuing with you, something I want to talk about are the children, Palestinian children in Israeli prisons. What can you tell us about that? How many are there, and what are the charges? What is happening?
Children have been imprisoned for the last, I think, maybe 50 years, and thousands of children have been arrested, and they're arrested in the middle of the night under very brutal conditions. These kids sometimes are just picked off the road when they're going to school, and they are just randomly arrested.
But
when they're very young,
for what reason?
Yeah, is to terrorize children when they're young, because when you make them afraid of soldiers and Israelis at a young age, they think that this will make the children not resist. Because you know, like in Intifada, the youth are the ones throwing the rocks and the stones, right? So they try to make them afraid at a young age, but they're not succeeding because, you know, Palestinian youth are very resilient. Yeah. But that's what they do. And you have kids going to, when they get arrested, they are tortured, they are beaten up, blue, black, their faces get swollen, and they break their bones. And then they are made to sign confessions in Hebrew. This is what's happening every day. At this moment, probably there are about 300 children under the age of 18 in Israeli prisons, as young as 12 years old.
As young as 12 years old, a defenseless child picked up in the middle of the night, beaten and forced into signing confessions. What do you think is being done in order to highlight this, or what needs to be done at this point?
Actually, I did a book, Dreaming of Freedom, Palestinian Child Prisoners Speak. And the good thing I've seen from that, with all this documentation, I found it important to document the children's stories, because this will be permanent. And this book actually has even been put on the reading list at the University of Hawaii. And it's been given to members of the US Congress. Last year, there was a bill raised by one of the congresswomen in America to say that US taxpayers' money should not be used to violate the rights of Palestinian children. I'm hopeful that this bill can be put forward again this year, because this year we have a Palestinian congresswoman called Rashida Tlaib, and we're hoping that this year she'll also put forward this bill again, and hopefully it will get more attention. This has to be raised, because I think the only way you can make a difference is to raise awareness in America. And basically the violation of human rights of children is indefensible. Nobody can say it's right. Shooting children, killing children, it's never right.
And Ms. Norma, you are absolutely correct. Developed nations that pride in their human rights conventions, they need to take notice of this. This is completely unacceptable and inhumane. Thank you so much, Ms. Norma Hashim, for joining us and talking to us. We're going to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Indus Special. While we continue discussing the on-ground situation in Gaza, we're now joined by Youmna El-Sayed, who's a journalist from Gaza. We're also joined by Dr. Khalil Elnamrouty, who's a professor of economics at the Islamic University of Gaza. Thank you both for joining us. Ms. Youmna, I'd like to begin with you. What can you tell us about the on-ground situation in Gaza at this moment?
Well, the situation in Gaza isn't good at all. I mean, humanitarian crisis and the humanitarian situation in Gaza just keeps getting from worse from bad to worse. If we're going to talk about the economic conditions in Gaza, the economy is simply paralyzed. More than 90% of the people of Gaza rely on aid. Okay, we have UNRWA aid that they rely on, that even has been affected by the recent cuts of the Trump's administration has done to UNRWA. If we're going to talk about electricity, if we're going to talk about water, every single sector in Gaza is being affected by the situation and the blockade that has been imposed on the Gaza Strip for more than 12 years now. I mean, the Gaza Strip is only an amount of 45 kilometers length and 5 kilometers wide, and it has almost 2 million people living in that very small area. It's one of the most densely populated areas in the world. It's in blockade for more than 12 years, which means that very little sources are being allowed into the Gaza Strip. The crossings are not lots of supplies are not being allowed to enter through the crossing borders.
And Ms. Youmna, the supplies that is not allowed to enter, they include basic necessities as well?
Yes, of course. If these basic necessities were allowed to enter the Gaza Strip, we wouldn't have such deterioration in the humanitarian situation in Gaza. At least if medicines were allowed to enter, we wouldn't find hospitals that are suffering from great shortage of medications, right? Fuel, for instance. Fuel is not allowed to enter the Gaza Strip in reasonable amounts that are enough to supply the whole strip. So we have times when the strip is out of power for more than 12 hours or continuous 12 hours. Sometimes it reaches 24 hours with no electricity.
So Ms. Youmna, let me ask you this. You have mentioned how basic necessities are barred from entering into Gaza. What do you think? What can you tell us is the main purpose of depriving civilians of these very, very fundamental basic rights and basic necessities?
I don't see any other reason for denying humans for their basic necessities, for Israel to deny them their basic necessities, basic rights, apart from just wanting to get rid of these people. There is no any other reason. I mean, this blockade is violating to all international laws, and yet Israel has still imposed it for over 12 years now on the Gaza Strip. Food necessities, medications. There is no reason for Israel to prevent these necessities from entering the strip. Just there could be no reasons. These are not weapons. These are not any dangerous elements. For,
and Ms. Youmna, stay with us here. I want to pull in Dr. Khalil into this conversation, and you also mentioned the economy. And Dr. Khalil, the World Bank states that Gaza's economy is in a free fall. What can you tell us about this?
The Gaza Strip economy is really collapsing nowadays because of the siege which was imposed by Israel for more than 12 years back. In fact, as Youmna said, when we are talking about, Gaza Strip, it is a very small geographical area of length of not more than 50 kilometers and width not more than 12 kilometers, and with population of more than 2 million, where, it is the highest density of population over the world, where almost 6,000 people, they are living, in 1 square kilometers. Second, Gaza Strip naturally is a bit poor in natural resources. We don't have, so much natural resources that allow, for building a strong economy. The third thing is that, with the blockade, the Israeli forces, they are not allowing many raw materials, many capital goods, many tools, machines, equipments that are very necessary, for helping, the industrial sector and the construction sector.
So, Dr. Khalil, it seems like all these blockades are specifically geared towards making sure every aspect of the social sphere of Gaza is completely collapsing.
Yeah. All the sectors are collapsing. If you are talking about agriculture sector, there's a problem. If you talk about industrial sector, there's a problem. If you talk about services sector, also there is a problem. Nowadays, the unemployment rate, in Gaza Strip is more than 46 to 48%. Most of these, unemployed people, they are from university graduates. More than 70% of the graduates also, they are not working. Why? Because chances to get a job is too difficult, because many factories, many industries also, they have shut down because of the complicated situation. Most the complicated situation as a result of Israeli forces results, in the Gaza Strip. This blockade, has led, to a shortage and a declining in the growth of the GDP of the Gaza Strip. The GDP has declined in the recent year. Every year, instead of improving GDP, the GDP is declining. When the GDP is declining, as we know also, the per capita income is also declining. Thus, the purchasing power of people declining, causing that aggregate demand in Gaza Strip is, is very much lowering.
And Dr. Khalil, it's expected that the economy will further worsen.
If the situation continues like this, of course, the situation and the economic is going to worsen, and we will see more collapse also in the GDP. We will see that also the poverty rate is going to rise more, and the unemployment, of course, is going to rise more. If the blockade is removed from the Gaza Strip, I am sure that people from Gaza Strip also, they have strength, they have power, they have talented people. We have, strong human capital. This human capital, they can really, work so hard, and they can really improve, the situation of the Gaza Strip. But, if the situation continue at this situation, no, the near future shows that, there will be more collapse in the Gaza Strip economy, and there will be more problem also for the economy.
Yeah, and Dr. Khalil, from what you have observed and what you have seen, do you think there are any measures being taken in order to control this free fall of the economy by the international community?
Yeah. There are different players, in the economy, in the Gaza Strip. The government, of course, unfortunately, we have two governments, and this is too sad. One government, in Ramallah, and one government in Gaza Strip, because of the political division. And we hope that one day comes that, and we will become united, and there is only one government. If we have only one government, I think also many of these problems can be resolved. Second thing, the international community and the NGOs, also they are playing, important role. But their role nowadays is not like before. They were, stronger, before the division, before 2007. But after 2007, also, their role in the Gaza Strip has declined. Their financing for, different projects has declined. So, because also, once again, also, the shortage of funds, and the activity of the international community has declined, so this also worsening the situation further and further.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Khalil, for joining us and talking to us about this economic situation in Gaza. Youmna, back to you. So something that Dr. Khalil mentioned here was how 70% of the graduates are unemployed. And with your interaction with the people in Gaza, and especially the youth, What can you tell us about the sentiments that are being fostered after such abysmal conditions?
Well, this, of course, is a very huge rate. You can imagine how much depression and frustrating it is for the youth once he knows that he is going to finish his university years and then just go and hang out at home, because there is basically no way that he can find a job in Gaza. Most youth have depression, they feel frustrated because of the situation, and the worst is that they know that there is nothing that is going to change in the near future. When the crossing of Rafah was opened last year, great amounts of youth who were able to travel out of Gaza left Gaza searching for another place to find a job. This is just how devastating the situation is for them.
So, Ms. Youmna, I'm hearing all this and I feel the pain that you're talking about. And I wonder, what does the future look like for people in Gaza? Because with so much depression, with no hopes for the future, what happens?
I just want to tell you something that last year, we just started having this phenomenon where people have started saying that they don't want to live anymore. This is not something that Palestinians, actually talk about, okay? Palestinians are known to be, especially people of Gaza, they're known to be very strong people who go through lots of difficulties, and they stand in front of these difficulties. Last year, we had lots of states of people who have committed suicide, just out of how frustrating and devastating the situation is. Whether we had a father who committed suicide because he can't just provide for his kids anymore. Okay, we had youth who have graduated from university and looked for work for so long but couldn't, and they have committed suicide. So something like this to happen in such a community like Gaza, this is a very dangerous fact that Gaza is actually going through. And people are starting to lose hope from the international community, from other countries, that no one is standing by them. No one is trying to change the reality of how cruel the reality is turning to be. No one is trying to give them a hand. No one is trying to change this reality. No one is trying to lift the siege off Gaza Strip. In time, the infrastructure just gets worse than it's already. The infrastructure of Gaza is totally destroyed. It just gets worse and worse. People don't have enough houses. Some people's houses that have been destroyed since the war of 2014 until now are not rebuilt. There's no shining future. Okay, people do not see that. They do not see that there is any hope in the future that is coming. And I think that this is one of the most important symptoms, a very dangerous symptom for how the future is getting shaped for these people later on.
Yeah. And Ms. Youmna, before you, a guest was talking about how children as young as 11 go and protest, go to the march with, of course, the very imminent and evident threat that they might get injured or they might get killed. What can you tell us about the protests that happen every week? Do you see them intensifying? Do you think that they increase in number because that's the only expression that people have left?
Definitely. The Palestinian people look at these protests as the only thing that is left that they can actually do. Okay, despite how dangerous it is where the borders are, despite knowing that for sure they might get hurt, they might get wounded, they might not even return home. Okay, people go there knowing that they are going to a very dangerous place, and yet they go because they say that this is our last choice to express to the world that we need to be free. We need this blockade to break. We need to break through this blockade. We need our rights. People say these are our legitimate rights, and we're demanding for them. We need to be we need to give our voices to the world. The world needs to know that there are Palestinian people in Gaza who are being oppressed and no one is looking out for them. So they definitely know when they're going there, they definitely know how dangerous it is. And yet they keep on going weekly to these protests.
And Ms. Youmna, when we're taught the people going to this, could you describe the scene that happens over there for people who do not know the on-ground situation? What are these protests like? What is happening?
Okay, basically, the Great March of Return that was first launched on the 30th of March of 2018 in Land Day. Land Day, of course, is the commemoration of the day that the Israeli administration or the Israeli army decided to start confiscating lands from the Palestinians and to build the Israeli state on. And then they expelled most of the Palestinians there into Gaza. These people are now making these protests to demand the right of return back to these lands that they were expelled from, and of course the breakage of the siege that has been imposed on Gaza for these 12 years. Now, when people go to protests in 5 camps along the eastern border of the Gaza Strip, we have Jabalia, that's in the north, and then we have Malaka, we have Al-Wusta, we have Khuza'a in Khan Yunis, and then we have Rafah. So now we've covered the border from the north to the south, along the borders with Israel. We have 5 camps. People go there weekly to protest the right of return and the breakage of the siege.
And Ms. Youmna, in anticipation of the violence that might outbreak, are there medical facilities made available? Because I read in a report that emergency medical tents are put up just because they anticipate there will be a breakout of violence.
Okay. There in the fields, in those camps where the protesters are protesting, we have ambulances, we have medical personnel, we have volunteers, okay, who just work there to help the protesters who get hurt or get shot or get wounded, okay. Some of these medical personnel, 2 of them, actually 3 of them, were killed in these protests, okay, through last year. We can't forget Razan and Meshal.
And these are unarmed medical experts that are coming just to help the protesters.
The protesters themselves are unarmed. No one is armed there. Neither the protesters nor the medical personnel and the volunteers that are helping them. These are just paramedics. Even the press journalists who were also wounded or killed, no one is armed there.
Ms. Youmna, so when you're telling us about the situation of all the protesters at the fence, what can you tell us about how many are armed, how many are unarmed? Because we hear about almost a significant number of people getting injured. So the assumption is always that they are inciting violence.
Okay, so basically, every single person who is protesting in these camps are unarmed protesters. There are no any armed people in that camp protesting. All these great amounts of people, whether they are Palestinian protesters, whether, of course, journalists just doing their job, covering the events, or the medical personnel, the paramedics who are there with their ambulances and volunteers ready to help the people who get wounded or shot. There is no person that is armed in the Palestinian side, in the Gaza side.
So Youmna, if these are people who are unarmed, what is causing for them to be shot at?
Basically, just protesting, approaching the fence, trying to approach the fence. Some of the people who actually got shot were just sitting in the field. and they were shot by sniper bullets. So this Israeli sniper basically aiming at the protester and shooting him in the head or the neck or the chest and causing him to die, basically knows exactly where that bullet is going and who he is targeting. Okay, so there is no reason for these people to be shot.
So, Ms. Youmna, this goes and ties in with something that one of our guests was earlier talking about, how Israeli soldiers terrorize young children as young as 12 by taking them out into the night, putting them in prisons, beating them up. So, of course, it seems like from everything you've told us and the guests before us, there is a very palpable sense of fear in the environment, and something that soldiers and the Israeli state are working towards creating.
Yes, definitely. I mean, what they're basically trying to do is terrorize the Palestinian children, whether in Gaza or the West Bank. Even the air raids and airstrikes that the Israeli military carries through the night on the Gaza Strip, this causes great terror for the children, the women, even the men. Everyone is extremely scared. Everyone is extremely afraid. There's no reasons for them.
Youmna, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for joining us and talking to us more about the on-ground situation. Everything that we've heard in today's show sheds light on the true on-ground picture, the lives of those who live in distress each and every day, something that the international community must take a look at, something that needs to be made sure that someone is being held accountable for all the lives that are being lost and traumatized every single day. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We'll see you again tomorrow with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.